what we wanted to have an opportunity, or I wanted to have an opportunity, to talk a little bit about the future of Utah Saint and SAINTCON. The slides you're about to see are a great representation of ADD, and so they're going to be all over the place. But if there's some things you can glean out of what we're doing and stuff in here that are helpful to you or fill a gap somewhere, that's really the intent here. I'm hoping that there's a lot of our committee, and board of trustees and other folks that join us in here and can answer some of the questions that you might have about the organization and what we do and how we do things and the conference and everything else. So that's really it, and it's not going to take a full hour. If we take a full hour, that's because you guys have a lot of questions, because there's only probably about 20 or 30 minutes of slides here. Which will give you your last opportunity to go down and trade any of the mini badges that you've got. Anybody not get a Yoda mini badge in here? Holy crud. I don't think there was a class for the Yoda mini badge ever. So here's the thing. This morning we found a bag of Yoda mini badges that was kind of stuffed underneath of the something that was never supposed to be undone or whatever. So I literally have in a bag right here, don't come up here yet, probably I would say 20 to 25 of them, and I will hand them out to you on my way out the door after this presentation. So if you didn't get one, there's probably not enough for everybody who raised your hand, but if you had one already, don't raise your hand or get a second one, because there's so many people that didn't get one. And I guess I just failed in the the amount of interest there are in Yoda mini badges this year, because, man, I can't walk 10 feet without, hey, do you have one of those? And it's been so awesome. I'm sorry, I'm on a little tangent here before we even get started, but it's been so awesome to meet so many people. I just had forgotten how conversational a mini badge can be when you're sitting there and you're catching up with people. And such, and so I've had a chance to meet so many people, many for the first time, and many that I consider, many of us consider SAINTCON as a family reunion of sorts. You get to see the security folks that you've worked with or met and, done things online with or whatever, and put names to faces and things. It's also a wonderful event. So we love putting it on. And that's why we're here. So we're going to talk just a little bit about it, but we're going to talk about the pants issue first. So here's the history, and I'm still seeking information, as I was mentioning. So many years ago, we took these very cool photos of all of the committee members that were the planning committee for SAINTCON, and it was one of those kind of pose things, and it was, waist up shot, and we put it on the website to give recognition to the people that put tons of energy and effort. And of course, somebody's going to take that and find some other image and Photoshop them together, and it became this ongoing meme. And they did such a good job that people were like, hey, did you actually wear those? And is that a photo or not? So you can tell the top part's black and white, the bottom part has color, it's Photoshopped together, but I still, to this day, don't know who created this, but it pops up every year, and I figured, you know what, hey, it's time to just own it. Like, if I own the meme, then I have the power, right? So, hey, I'm owning it. So that's the story. So if you're wondering, I'm not trying to, do anything other than just own a meme and maybe help kill it, finally, or whatever. But let's get into a couple of things. For those of you that are new to SAINTCON, how many of you are first timers? So you're kind of in here just wondering, what the heck is this thing or whatever? Okay, good. There's a lot of you here. Like, it blows our mind how many new people churn in every single year for SAINTCON. But let me give you just a little bit of history about SAINTCON. Okay, SAINTCON is a conference that has actually been going for 21 years. But it's probably something you've never heard of until the last 5 to 6 years. And what it was a conference that we started running out of the Utah Education Network, now the Utah Education and Telehealth Network, many, many years ago, because I got to a point in my career where I was somehow in charge of this new thing called security 20 some odd years ago. And we would go out and we would visit the people throughout the state, and we would find out that we don't even have firewalls in place. Like, we're not doing anything. What's security? Like, yeah, we know that there's hackers and things, but they're not after us. We're just people in Utah and things. And so it became very apparent very quickly that we needed to start having conversations about security. And so with the help of UETN, we started the Security Summit. And I think the first one of those was in 2001. And that was 25 people from most of education and some state government folks and other things that we got into a room up on the University of Utah campus, and we just talked about security for a couple of days. And it blew everybody's mind. It's like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that you could do this. And we showed people how to hack things and gave them the tools, like, hey, why don't you just try this and see? And it's amazing, and hopefully many of you have had this experience during SAINTCON this year where you've had that aha moment. Like, who's picked themselves out of handcuffs for the first time in their lives this week, right? Was that an aha moment? I hope that was, that you're like, this is not that hard. And the thing is when you start looking at security and other things, you can realize that there's a lot of vulnerabilities and a lot of things that we need to protect and make better. And so, anyways, the history of the UtahSAINT Conference and things, it grew a little bit year over year, and there was several years where there was about 150 of us, I think was that critical mass for many years. And we held it down in St. George, beautiful area down there. It's nice and warm in October, and such. But we would hold it down there, and it would be about that same 150 people every single year that we would do this. And we had so much fun. In fact, we used to break out in Nerf gun fights in the middle of talks. We used to throw things at the presenters. I mean, it was a lot more, I don't know, what's the right word there? Mischievous, I don't know. Rowdy, that's the word. A little more rowdy and stuff. But we had so much fun, and we would have the craziest people come up and present. You know who they were? It was that guy right there. It was this guy right here. And we didn't know everything there was to know about security at the time, but we'd learned something, and it was like, we're going to share this. Like, hey, did you know that if you actually started blocking ports and protocols, like, you could do some really cool things? And that was where this kind of started. And so it graduated year over year, and what we ended up doing back in about 2006, 2007 is we created, in kind of conjunction with it, an informal group. It was literally just, hey, you want to be on a mailing list and we'll talk about this stuff? And we created something called the UtahSAINT group. And it kind of became just the same people that come to the conference and other things, and we'd let them join the mailing list, and we'd email things back and forth and like, hey, this is what I'm seeing, because it created more timely conversations rather than just once a year. It's like we could talk about things. And then we went through a process of vetting and making sure that everybody on that list was cleared to hear the information that we were going to talk about and stuff. We went through all these kinds of things. But once we created that organization, it was started to be called the UtahSAINT Conference from that point forward. And it proceeded to be called the UtahSAINT Conference until about, I want to say 2013, 2014. Like I said, I have a headache. It's kind of, I'm fuzzy on dates right now, or even years at this point. We'll get it close to a year. Anyways, then we get to the point where we're at this slide. What we decided to do, because of the complexity of the conference and everything else, is we formed a 501c6 nonprofit membership organization for the UtahSAINT organization. That's what we called it. And as things became more complicated and things with the conference and some of the other outreach we were doing, we started running the UtahSAINT Conference out of this 501c6 and created a board of trustees and everything else I'll talk about here in a minute. Bottom line is, we're here and we have this organization, and I'll bring you up to the current history here in a minute. But our mission really hasn't changed. The UtahSAINT organization provides community and education to cybersecurity and IT professionals. That's our mission. That's what we do. It's evolved over time, and we include more people in different communities and other things. And it started very much in the roots of education. So if you see a lot of people, if you're in K-12 or higher ed education, raise your hand if you're willing to, okay? If you look around the room and you're not familiar, there's a lot of us here because that growth came out of that Utah Education Network. We're kind of just working on some things and stuff. And so a lot of people here come from that background. But we opened it up and started taking in private industries and other people because we knew that if we grew our security community, that's a lot more voices and a lot more talent and capabilities coming in and feeding into this. And so it benefited us in a big way. It also became that spark that you light, that starts burning, and you get to a point where it's going down, and you know that there's a big old dynamite block over here that it's going to hit at some point, because all of a sudden it blows up into, oh my gosh, this conference and what we're doing is actually a thing, and it's not just 150 people in a room talking weird things about security. And anyways, that's the evolution that we're going through. Volunteer nonprofit. Wanted to help you understand that everybody that participates in the UtahSAINT organization is a volunteer. There is not a single paid employee or anything else for that organization. And we built it that way. It's in our bylaws that it's that way. So there's no paid person. The organization, so here's the governance of the organization, the leadership. The UtahSAINT organization is run by a board of trustees, a board chairman, a secretary, and a treasurer are the primary officers. And then we have a bunch of other trustees that are part of a voting committee that helps orient and run the organization. And again, they are all volunteers. They're giving their time and talents to this. Underneath of that is the conference planning committee, and they get a lot of praise and everything else, but they are technically separate. Many of the board of trustees members are on the planning committee as well, but the conference planning committee is organized by the board chairman of the organization, is responsible for overseeing all planning for the SAINTCON conference. This process begins each January, and the volunteers are responsible for everything that happens here. There's also a membership committee formed in the UtahSAINT organization who's responsible for handling all membership functions and activities. This is whether you want to join the organization, whether you're like, I'm out. I don't think we've ever had that really happen. But those types of things, there's a membership committee. And that's how we're structured. We're pretty simple. This isn't, when you're working with volunteers and everything else, it's not like we've got this big conglomerate or anything else going on. It's very simplistic, and it takes tons of hours to do all the tax work and all the other things that happen with that organization. So it's kind of a thing. So what we do, bringing us into a little bit more modern history or anything else, SAINTCON is obviously now the primary event that the UtahSAINT organization puts on, and it continues to grow in size and complexity every single year. Okay, a couple of other things that the UtahSAINT organization does that maybe is a little less known. So you're going to want to get your cameras out here in just a second. I'm going to show you a slide that you might want to take a picture of. Maybe, maybe not. Okay. But one of the other things that we do is we have semi-weekly security briefings. If you've not heard of those, you're going to have a slide here with the link on it in just a moment to join those. Okay. Every other week, we get together as an organization, as a group, and we talk about all of the current threats, risks, vulnerabilities, things that you should be working on, or new trends and tactics that are emerging that you might want to have some understanding about. It lasts anywhere between 30 to 40 minutes of your time. It's live. We do it in WebEx or Zoom or some other platform like that, so it's interactive. If you've got a question, you can ask a question, or if you have something that you see that's emerging or coming up that you think is interesting, there's an opportunity at the end of the briefing to present that and talk about it. And it's actually, how many of you in the room participate, at least on some regular basis, in those briefings? There should be quite a few hands, okay? Because we end up having between 70 and 100 people every session participating in that briefing. Most of the time, it's just me. You get more me. I don't know why it's just me. But you get more me telling you everything about what's going on based off of my limited capabilities of researching. And so community input and community-driven content is something I really appreciate there. But that's one of the other things we do. And then we also do education outreach. We have, as you can see downstairs, we have like 40 soldering irons. We've got all kinds of video equipment and microphones and PA systems and other things we purchased over the years to facilitate events and the conference that we lend out. So if you are in a space where you're doing education, whether that's a local group whether that's a religious or church group, or whether that's an education group, and you need 30 soldering irons, if you're a member of the Utah Saint organization, we'll lend them to you. We'll also give you our solder and our components and other things based off of what we've got. We don't just like buy them for you or whatever, but and we'll lend that to you to facilitate you taking and enriching some sort of education activity within those types of groups. And so it's really great for medium-sized groups and teaching security topics and other things. That's our mission. That's what we do. So those are the primary things that the Utah Saint organization functions on. This is the URL. If you want to join our security briefings, this takes you over to a MailChimp. That's the email system that we use. A MailChimp sign-up list, and what that's essentially doing is subscribing you to the list where you'll only get one, or you'll get two email, or one, hold on. You'll get one email every other week, and it's not just like a reminder thing. You're going to get, whether you attend the briefing or not, the entire agenda of everything that's going to be discussed in there, so that if you can't attend, you can read, here are the things that we're talking about this week. Or maybe that's, hey, let's see if it's important enough for me to cancel my other meeting and join or not. You can make that decision, but it's good security information, and you're welcome to join us. What generally happens is the first few, right after the SAINTCON, all of a sudden it turns into we're trying to cram 500 people into a Zoom room, and everybody kind of gauges whether it's effective or not. The next briefing will be this coming Wednesday, so like 5-7 days or whatever it is. I don't even know what day it is today, hardly. So anyways, if you would like, please join. Okay, so let's talk about SAINTCON, because it's kind of a thing. SAINTCON comes from humble beginnings. I think I've shared some of the stories about where we come from and how we got here. I got you up to the point where we were calling it the Utah Saint Conference, and we would hold it in different places all around the state. And then we finally got to the point to where we were getting 300 and 400 people coming to this conference, and we had to start like renting out the entire union building at Weber State University and things to hold these things. And it was about that time, I think it was 2015 that we called it SAINTCON. Anybody want to correct me on that? 2015 is when we changed it over and called it SAINTCON instead. Does anybody know why we call it SAINTCON, or where Utah Saint and those things come from? Anybody curious? I mean, it's kind of a whole different story or whatever else and things. But when we created that Utah Saint organization, it wasn't anything about any sort of religiosity or anything else. It was, we created this acronym, the Security Advisory and Incident Network Team, that spelled out SAINT, and it was kind of cool. So the proper way to spell it is Utah with U capitalized, Ta uncapitalized, but Saint is all capitalized if you want to follow our style guide, excuse me. But that's what it is. It's the Security Advisory and Incident Network Team for Utah. And so it was really hard to fit Utah Saint Conference on all of our materials and things in some format, so we truncated it, and that's why it's called SAINTCON. And that's why whenever you see it officially, it's all capitalized, because it's SAINTCON. Anyways, there you go. There's your history for the day. We began opening it up to the world when we renamed it to SAINTCON, meaning that we no longer just advertised it and talked about it to education and state government and some of these other areas. And from that point, it just started, we lit that fuse, and it started exploding. And size and complexity-driven growth is now becoming our biggest problem with SAINTCON. And I can kind of talk to you a little bit about it. It has to do with volunteerism and everything else, meaning that, as I mentioned, we're all volunteer. There's nobody that makes money off of this conference or anything else. And when you have a day job and you're responsible for all the things in your day job and everything else, everything becomes nights and weekends. And we burn a lot of nights and weekends, to the point to where there's a lot of burnout that happens with the planning committee, with staff members that are in charge of contests or communities or events and everything else. But it's a labor of love. I put it in there, and it's managed fairly well up to this point because of the community that we have. And you probably heard me say it many times in different talks, and it's kind of cliche a little bit at this point, but Utah does have, by far, the best cybersecurity community of anywhere I've ever seen. And it's true. I mean, it's weird and crazy that here in this, we'll call it podunk state, that we can get 1,500 people together to talk about cybersecurity, and 80 to 90% of them are from the state of Utah. I mean, it's a big deal. We do a lot of cool things here. But with volunteerism, there's only so much you can put on people. And so growth is our challenge, meaning that all of a sudden we went from 1,200 people last year approximately that attended the conference to this year it's 1,500 people that attended the conference. And if you can imagine just for a minute, in fact, I think I've got a slide for it here because we talked about nights and weekends. I should mention here that SAINTCON now, just for all the things that you get to participate in, takes approximately 6 months of planning. We start in January, and then we really start in March, and then we start really good in April, and then by May, we're spending nights and weekends a couple of times a week. By June and July, that's nights and weekends every week, and then August, September, October, I don't think we even sleep. Like, we have to start doing the overnights and weekends kind of things. But let's talk about the other issues here, and that's logistics. You probably noticed, those of you that have been longtime SAINTCON attendees, that we've always had opportunities for like discounts and hey, just kind of work out your connections with these folks and other things to get into the conference and everything else. And we took all those away this year. We didn't do that because we're in there for the money grab or anything else like that, but I'll tell you what, every time we create some sort of exception at this point, at this volume, the logistics explode into a million different directions, and it becomes super hard. Because now that person that's in charge of registration, if they have to deal with more than just one ticket type and one registration process, and now we have to have discounts, and then we have to have discounts on discounts, and then we have to have discount codes, and then we have to have redeemable codes versus registration codes. Can you see real quick how it just gets out of hand? And so we started doing away, and we're starting to try and streamline and simplify all of our processes. And so that's the reason why we've done that, in case that was a question from anybody. And so we are trying desperately to standardize our processes to make this be more successful and to take a lot of this load off a lot of these volunteers and such. And so a couple of the other challenges I think are worth mentioning here, other than logistics. In fact, we have 2 people in our logistics department now just to manage all of those little things. Like every time you get one of those attendee bags, even though there wasn't a ton of stuff in there this year, somebody had to go through and procure all that stuff, bring it all in, put it all in bags, and there's 1,500 of you guys now. That's a lot of work. We spent an entire weekend putting together registration bags in my house. Kind of crazy. Anyways, some of the other challenges that we have. Storage. We now have so much junk. Because if you think about it, as we've evolved the conference, we used to do all of our own AV, meaning that we would bring our projectors, we would bring our cameras, we would bring our audio systems, and everything that we needed in order to make it work, because paying for the venues, in-house systems, and other things were not something that we could do at the time. And so now we're getting to the point where we've got all this extra stuff over the years that we've collected, and it sits in a storage unit for 11 and a half months out of the year most of the time, and such. So we struggle with that. Staging, we struggle with a lot of that too, getting ready for the conference and such. We struggle with setup sometimes. We do have a wonderful volunteer effort that comes in and helps us set up, but it's unorganized. Like, you're not coming in here with, hey, you're supposed to do this. In fact, I'll say this, and I don't mean this in any sort of negative way, but when somebody comes up to me on Sunday or Monday and says, hey, what can I do to help? The thing is it's not like, it's almost like, I don't know what you can do to help. Go find somebody that's doing something and help them, because they all think that I'm somehow the oracle of, here's everything that needs to be done. Yeah, if we just do this and this and this, because it's so complex. I don't even know all of the things that go on anymore. Everything that happened at registration this year, I don't know. Everything, how those communities got set up, other than hanging the banners, which are pretty cool, by the way. Other than hanging the banners, I don't know, So all that stuff happens by volunteer effort, and it takes people a lot of time. Attendee bags, badges, we talked about, mini badge design. Some of these things take a lot of time and energy and create logistics problems and everything else. And so if you are interested, and maybe this is the slide where I'm supposed to land and say, hey, if you are interested in contributing to the SAINTCON conference in some sort of meaningful way, these are our biggest needs. These aren't all of our needs, but these are our biggest needs. We need graphics designers. I spend literally, I'm just going to throw this out there. I mean, it's a guess of a number, but probably 200 to 300 hours building graphics designed for this conference every single year. Most of the graphics that you see on signage, on your mini badges and other things are something that I've designed either last year, this year, or whatever, the logo designs and everything else, and that takes a lot of my time, tons and tons of it. I could totally use some help. So if you're a graphics designer or know one that's really good and that is volunteer effort or is willing to volunteer, I'm interested in that one. Web content developers and managers. We do a really good job with our website, but we struggle with that. So if you're able or willing to volunteer and help keep our web content up to date and things, that's one area. Mini badge designers. We've probably seeded, in fact, we coined the phrase at our committee, we call it Pool Con, where we go sit around the pool and just talk about how the conference is going. But we coined the phrase, we have poked the mini badge bear this year. And we know we have. Meaning that even though there are probably only 100 mini badges that were unique to the conference this year, okay, and maybe I've heard rumors of up to 200 or whatever. If we think that that's the threshold, how many of you are planning on going back and designing your own mini badge for next year? That you didn't have one this year, right? Like, yeah, it's going to be off the hook next year for mini badges. Just saying. Mini badge designers, hey, we can probably use you, and those of you that have been inspired to maybe go and learn that new skill, we might have a community badge that you could design next year, because that's a ton of my time that I spend on that as well. Hackers Challenge puzzle designers, we're always looking for good ideas. Josh Galvez, he's over there talking about Hackers Challenge right now, but the interesting thing about this is you can't run a challenge or a contest like that for as many years and keep just coming up with fresh ideas. You run out of ideas at a certain point. I know because I ran out of ideas before it got handed off to Josh Galvez. And so he's getting to that point, and he's indicated it, and very respectfully, like, I don't know if I can think new things up. And so ideas are what he needs. And so if you've got Hackers Challenge puzzle ideas, that's one way to work on it. So let's talk a little bit about SAINTCON and the future. Okay, we're likely, I'm going to drop this right here so that you are all on fair warning. We are likely not going to continue to let SAINTCON grow in size. Dave? I'll get to that. There's a slide for that. Okay, so SAINTCON is likely, we're not going to let it continue to grow in size. We think that with the volunteer effort that we have, and without having to go hire people for the Utah Saint organization to manage books and all of these other things, that the 1,500 mark is about what we think we can hold. Plus, it fits well in the conference venue. You're not bumping into shoulders and things, but there's a lot of people around too. So anyways, I just want to put you on notice. 1,500 may be the maximum number for the foreseeable future. Doesn't mean that we won't make a decision later to, hey, you know what, I think we've got this figured out and we can take on 300 more. But for next year, don't anticipate growth in the conference. This will be the first time ever that we have capped at the same level as the year before on conference registrations. Now, this also needs our Board of Trustees to weigh in on this. This is not an executive decision that's being made right this moment, but I want you to be on notice that SAINTCON will sell out quickly in the future. And so when we start sending out those notices like, hey, it's time to register, you're probably going to have a week, maybe, because it sold out in a month this year, which we've never seen that kind of demand before. Anyways, a couple of other things. Costs for SAINTCON will remain low. In fact, we are considering lowering the cost of SAINTCON for next year. Again, the Board of Trustees need to weigh in on this and everything else, because SAINTCON is not about making money. This conference is a cost recovery con, meaning that the majority of the money that we bring in pays for the venue, pays for the food, pays for the free sodas, pays for all the mini badges and all the other things. And so what we plan on at this point is a break-even point this year at about 1,100 attendees, meaning that we needed to have 1,100 attendees in the room or registered for us to not have it come out of my savings account or somebody else's savings account, which has happened in years before, or in years past, by the way. But that we had to have 1,100. But when we sold from 1,100 to 1,500, now we have a little bit of extra money in that bank. And so what we think is if we're going to hit that 1,500 mark, our break-even mark will probably be calculated at 1,400 attendees-ish, meaning that we could probably drop the price back down because, again, we're not here to make money on this conference at all. And we think it's very reasonable for 4 days of content and coming out and hanging out and networking and getting about 50,000 mini badges and everything else. Although the cost will likely follow any inflation curve because we're all kind of worried and seeing that kind of craziness. And so just be prepared. I don't want to say, yeah, well, he said $250 in that presentation, but now he wants $300. Well, if the dollar's worth less and I've still got to buy mini badges, we're going to want to have mini badges, right? Anyway, so just understand that that's our mission as well. We're not here to try and make money off of this conference at all. In fact, we only bank this is full disclosure, like if you want to know. Every single year for several years, we would only take in about $5,000 to $10,000 extra buffer each year. And it took us a really long time to save up about $70,000 to put in the bank before 2020 hit. And we did a virtual con for free, and we basically blew through that entire budget, or most of it. And so we're just kind of recouping. Our intention, just again for full disclosure, for those of you that are interested in the governance of the organization, is to keep about a $100,000 reserve, meaning that we can pay for badge costs and other things that have to happen before registration opens and some of these other things that also covers the administrative costs for the organization. Okay, we have storage costs, we have to pay attorneys, we have to pay CPAs and bookkeepers and other things like this for some of these services to make this easier. And so we do have some of those administrative costs. That's what those go to. There's full disclosure. If you want more detail, come ask me. We are... Which year? Okay, I can generalize it. So to run this conference, it'll end up costing the UtahSAINT organization probably somewhere around $320,000. And we took in approximately $348,000 in registration and other revenue. If that's, there you go. I mean, I'm throwing out generalized numbers. If you want specifics, we are very transparent in our finances as an organization as well, and you're welcome to come up and say, hey, I want to see it. So that's fine. Okay, bigger and broader content. We think that because of all the buzz that's surrounding SAINTCON and other things, we're becoming, we're a security conference that's on the map now. How many of you are from out of state that are still here, right? Okay. And keep your hands up for just a second. I wanted to do this in opening ceremonies and I forgot. If you're from Idaho, put your hands down. Because we kind of adopt the Idahoans, right? Okay, but still, I would be interested in hearing, in fact, I could probably look in the registration system. There's so little data that we collect because of privacy reasons, but we do want to know some of that information, and so there's very little data we have. I'm going to go look through. I didn't have an opportunity to see, but it's becoming more noticed. SAINTCON is now talked about at DEF CON and at ShmooCon and these other things. And so when we're talking about registration selling out quickly in the future, there's a lot of external demand that if they just knew what we were doing here in Utah, they're going to be the ones competing for these tickets. And so one of the challenges that we'll talk about later or figure out is how to make sure that our local community has the first chance at tickets. Seth right here, one of our membership and the registration czar for the UtahSAINT organization, has a comment. 14% of the people here are from out of state, according to the registration system. Anyways, we're growing in reputation and everything else. I think that's a good thing. It's attracting some good content. Like all of a sudden, the presenters that were like, what the heck is SAINTCON? I don't want to come present there. We're getting some really high quality presenters and people interested in participating here. So anyways, that's one of the good problems to have. And so we're going to continue to grow in that area as well. this answers your question, Dave. Here's how to get involved. If you are interested in getting involved in SAINTCON, in January we have what we call a call for committee. And this is where we seat a committee, a conference planning committee, that is responsible for all aspects of the conference and its functions. And so what we do currently is we kind of do an attrition-based thing, meaning that if a committee member has not burnt the candle at both ends enough yet, that they can continue to be in the role and responsibility in that committee year over year until we either kick them out or they're like, I'm done. And the I'm done thing happens from time to time, and it's never a negative thing. It's just some people are like, I need to take a break and a year off. So that happens in January, and so what happens generally is to the Utah Saint list, in the SAINTCON Discord and other places, you're going to hear about open committee positions in January. And we hope to have those seated by the end of January, because by the time February and March open up, we have a committee retreat where we get all those folks together and we start planning the conference. We plan the structure, we plan how are we going to do these things, or what are we going to do in these areas, and it kind of goes through that process. And then by the time that's done, as early as April and May, we have a call for contests, communities, and events. And those are 3 separate items, but this is how you can get involved in SAINTCON in probably the most meaningful way if you don't have 6 months of your life to give away. Okay, so 6 months of your life up here, 2 to 3 months of your life right here, maybe 3 or 4 weeks of prep time in life here, and down here you give a week of your life at the con kind of thing, just helping you understand the levels here of commitment, and we'll sell it on you. It's like a timeshare. We'll get you sold. But contest community events, these are our staff members, and they fall underneath of one of the committee members' roles and responsibilities. And these are the ones that are putting together the AppSec community and the RFID community. These are all, again, volunteers that are coming and spending 3 months of, hey, I got to go out and procure all this stuff, and hey, can you help me find this? And man, wouldn't it be cool if? Man, that question is so dangerous sometimes. Wouldn't it be cool if? Right? And so call for contest community events happens sometime in the April-May timeframe, depending on how ready we are for it as a committee. Call for presenters generally opens in the May timeframe. And again, I put approximates here because it changes based off of where we are in our processes and things. Our deadline for all of these things is generally, we have to know by the time registration opens who's volunteering so that we can give them the codes that they need to register, because one of the things that costs us so much money every single year is somebody will pay for the conference and they want to volunteer, but they haven't heard back from us yet, whether they're going to be a volunteer or a speaker or something else. And then they get awarded that, and we have to refund that. Our refund costs on our registration transaction system is $15 a ticket. So it costs us quite a bit of money when we do that. So our goal is to get all that stuff done before we open up registration in July. So that helps you with the time frame here. Anyways, call for presenters in May. Call for volunteers happens in June. This is if you want to come and just get involved and just help in some general area, that's probably the easiest, best, and nicest way to get involved is come volunteer for us and get a feel for it, and then maybe it kind of stirs the bug in you to come back and be a staff member in one of the communities or contests or something else. Or, I mean, down here, these are a little bit more just, generalized things. We have just call for great people. One of the things that is super interesting about SAINTCON is most of the people in what we would call a leadership position at the conference, these aren't people that went through some strong vetting process or anything else. These are literally the people that came in and said, hey, I'll do that for you. And it just kind of morphed into, okay, well, can you do this too? Oh, yeah, sure. And we just suck people's lives away that way. I mean, it's a real thing, but we're looking for great people. If you are interested and you want to be involved in the conference, you don't have to necessarily follow these processes exactly. In fact, these processes are kind of arbitrary, to some degree. Volunteers, not so much. We want structure there because there's almost 200 of you out there. We also have a call for diversity. We think that we need more diverse opinions and ideas inside of our conference planning, okay? I think that's critical. I think that's critical in our industry in general, not just on planning committee and everything else. And we also need to call for connected people. If somebody knows how to get a hold of Mark Rober, we have been trying to get that guy to come keynote for us for years. And we just can't get the right contacts. We can't find, hey, here's how to get. We think that Mark would come up here and do an amazing job and probably have content for all of his YouTube videos for a month, just experiencing what we do at this conference, right? But something like that. If anybody knows Mark, let's read. Do you know, or okay, I'm not necessarily advocating that we spam him and things, but we would love to have somebody with that kind of charisma, that kind of influence and other things come and talk to us about the cool things that he's doing, and maybe use the opportunity to help him understand there's this whole other side of things other than building stuff that is right up his alley, right? Anyways, he's one of many people that we're seeking. But if you are connected to people that are movers, shakers, and would fit well into our community as either somebody that's running a community or a keynote or something, we need you. We need your connections. Okay. Here's the dates for SAINTCON 2023. It'll be in October. That's kind of a meme. Is Bash Ninja in the room? I bet he is next door, for sure, right? He keeps asking me, like every other day, like, do you have the dates yet? Do you have the dates yet? Do you have the dates yet? I says, no, we don't have them. We're not going to publish them or anything else anytime soon. And so this was kind of a meme for him. It's like I wanted to let him, like, wait, you told me you weren't going to publish them. And he has his reasons and everything else. But here's the reason why we don't publish our dates at the close of one con before the next one, is that until we have a conference planning committee that we know is going to be able to pull off the con, I'm not going to sign a $300,000 contract when I only have $100,000 in the bank for next year. And so when we have that taken care of, we generally sign and contract in the March, April timeframe with the venue here and start entering into some of the other contracts that we have at about that time. So watch for our save the date announcement sometime early next year after we get the next committee formed. Okay, then just a little side note, this is the ADD part of me. If you are interested in one of the most incredible book series that I've ever, Trust the Awesome. This is my favorite book series, and if you're a geek like me, you will love this. In fact, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you listen to this on Audible by the reader R.C. Bray. He does all of the voices, and this will amaze you, okay? But here's the caveat. You have to promise me that even though the book is sort of interesting but not super interesting, for the first half of the first book, you have to promise that you will get to the part where you meet Skippy. If you can get to the part where you meet Skippy, you are going on a 13-book adventure. And yes. Yeah, so here's another testimonial up here, I'm sure. This is my favorite book series of all time. Well, not maybe of all time. I'm really akin to like the Ready Player One original, not that 2 junk or whatever. Anyways, I digress. If you're looking for a good Audible book to listen to on the way home, this one's the one, okay? All right, it's time now for Q&A. I'll take any generalized questions. I don't promise to give you all of the detailed answers. How are we on time? So we've got about 10 to 15 minutes before they're going to start tearing the walls down and everything else, but go ahead, right here. Okay, great question. Registration for SAINTCON typically opens up sometime between the 4th of July and the 15th of July in that window. But what we will do is by the time we get to the point where we're going to open up registration, it won't be ambiguous. We will say it'll open on X date, and it'll be on our website. We don't try and hide it from you like, oh, we're just going to pop it up. That's not how it happens. But good question. So July, first part of July. I think that maybe it used to kind of tie to it, but the reason why it lands where it does in a lot of ways is a little bit traditional and has to do with education, meaning that a lot of the educators and folks, when you're starting up school and it's August, September, man, for IT folks in education, it's a heavy lift to get all those Chromebooks out and all those other things. And so we always bumped it a little bit further so that by the time SAINTCON would happen, that these guys aren't just completely inundated with stuff. And so that's where the tradition came from, but that's not necessarily the main driver anymore. This is just, it's become that's the year away part now, and to move it to something like March, like there is no way that we could move it. In fact, my wife's got a great story about how we moved it to March one year. Right, and we've heard that before, and so what we try and do is avoid the fall break week when we can, but sometimes we're limited to, hey, this is when the venue has the options and things. So, but a good question. But that is where that comes from, and I don't anticipate ever changing it. We need 12 months. We need that break for a little bit. I need to not think about SAINTCON for 3 or 4 months. And if we were to start planning something in March or something, there's no way. We would all die. Go ahead. Okay, so the question is, what about venue, and is it going to be here for the foreseeable future? And we think yes. The Utah Valley Convention Center is the right size for us. It is the right, it's got all of the things that we've grown into and need. The only other option for us at this point would be to move it to something like the Salt Palace. And as much as we would love to get it into the Salt Lake Valley, because that makes it so our keynotes and all these people that we're bringing in from out of town don't have to get off the plane and be like, I got to drive for an hour? Because that happens. We would love to get to Salt Lake, but I'm just not a huge fan of the Salt Palace if we were at a 30,000 person event, yeah, let's fill the place. But I don't know, it feels empty to me when you have even a group this large in that gigantic event. And so the only other option that we've had available to us has been the Mountain America Expo Center, or what used to be called Southtown Expo and such. But we've been in so many events there, and the acoustics in their expo floor for talks and other things is just awful. And so we just don't think that that's a viable option. So for the foreseeable future, to answer your question directly, we plan on being here at the Utah Valley Convention Center. So we apologize profusely if that is inconvenient for you, but one of the other things, and if Danny's somehow in the room, I don't know if he is, this place, they work with us so well. They are so accommodating. They are so understanding about the weirdness that we bring, the dumb, weird things that we do, and everything else. And so we couldn't be more honored to have them as a partner. I mean, we consider them a partner here. We do pay them money to be here, and appropriately so. Like, it's not free to power what your guys are doing down in home labs. Like, I don't know what you're doing down there. But, it's not free. But a great question. We will be here for the foreseeable future. We know there's at least one more SAINTCON to happen. I'm not trying to scare anybody, but we only plan 1 year in advance, and so don't anticipate that this is a 10-year thing, because there might be a point where my candle at both ends is burnt, and somebody else is going to have to take it. So if you're ready to take that, come see me after. I'll give you a Yoda badge, and it's yours, kind of thing. Anyways, was there another question or comment? Go right here. Okay, great question. So we talked about the call for volunteers and everything else. How is that disseminated? Our website and Twitter feed are our only two official communication mechanisms. And so if you are subscribed to us or you're following us on Twitter, you'll get those alerts. Or you're going to need to visit our website periodically, and the call for volunteers will be on the main front page. You won't miss it. That's where it happens. What's that? Discord too. Like, if you're in the SAINTCON Discord, you're going to hear about it for sure. So, anything else? In the back, red shirt. Okay, that's a great question, and it's a trade secret. Actually, no, it's not. It's really not. Those LED filaments, they're cool, huh? Right? when I saw that for the first time, I immediately thought lightsaber mini badge. There we go. We got it. And so, very honestly, I got them off of AliExpress. They were super cheap, which is why I was able to make 250 to 300 of them for you guys to all have. And make sure you get the 3.3 volt ones because they make other voltages that we don't facilitate on this badge. So, but yeah, they're pretty inexpensive overall. So I expect to see 1 or 2 non-Troy, non-Jupiter created lightsaber mini badges next year as a result. Now, don't steal the idea of the flux capacitor badge that I'm going to do with LED filaments next year, okay? That one's coming. Don't steal that idea. I'm just throwing it out there. Don't think of it on your own and think, oh, that would be cool. And I'm coming in and I'm like, oh, mine sucks. So anyways, anything else? Any other questions about the conference or our direction? Go ahead. Yeah, do you have an hour? We don't. So here's the thing. And Danny, if you want to start moving walls, you can. You can do it right in the middle of this thing, and it's not a big deal. We're just going to start opening up. Family night. One of the things, whether it's cultural to us here in Utah, being very family-oriented or anything else, or whether it's just, I love, personally, seeing a kid have that aha moment to where you've just broken their brain, and they've realized that I can pick a lock. I'm 5 years old and I can pick a lock. Now, my kids have all had that aha experience, and I've seen how it's changed their lives and how it's changed mine, because when the principal from the school calls and says, hey, your son's trying to pick all the locks on all the bicycles outside, kind of thing. True story. True story, but I love seeing that aha moment, and so it just makes sense. The family night event is actually administered by the SAINTCON Widows, which is a women's group, and if you're interested, and if you are of that gender, there's a vibrant group of women that love to share those types of things. It's a STEM-based activity. If you didn't participate, you missed out, and such. We apologize for those of you that didn't make it in time to get pre-reg and that weren't able to bring your kids because it filled up like that and such. But we've got some planning to do. We know if there's growing pains at SAINTCON, there are growing pains with the kids' night event, and not in a bad way, but that's a hard logistical thing to pull off. And so thanks to those widows for doing that and facilitating that event. But it's going to continue, and that's kind of the impetus. I love getting those kids' brains broken earlier on. We don't teach that very much anymore. So, anything else? Last question. Who cut my hair? Who cut my hair? Maybe I didn't hear the last part of that, but anyways, I go to great clips just like everybody else. So, thank you, everybody. And I'll transition to the other stage and we'll close this thing out.